So I wanted to start off with just a quick update of what happened last year in 2021, and then what they're predicting for this year, what their outlook is for the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. So in 2021, we had 21 named storms, which was the total number of what they had put out in names. So fortunately, we got to the end of the list, and that was it. There were 7 hurricanes, 4 of those were major hurricanes, and 8 of them hit the U.S. coastline. So that just kind of gives you an idea of where we were at last year during hurricane season. They also made a note that it was the 7th consecutive year that we had a named storm prior to June 1st, which is technically the start of hurricane season. So if you've been following the meteorologists and the talk this year, they've been talking about potentially moving the start date of hurricane season to May 15th. So that might be occurring in the near future, maybe next year, maybe the following year. This year, we obviously saw that potential tropical cyclone go through, which did become Tropical Storm Alex. It was right around June 1st, right? So Thursday, Friday. So I don't know if they'll consider that as being prior to June 1 or not. But if they do, that might be another reason for them to consider moving that hurricane season to May 15th. So more to come on that in the future, but that's just kind of some of the talks in that meteorological world. So 2022, so this is what they're looking at. 14 to 21 named storms. So last year, 21 named storms, so they're predicting about the same, 14 to 21. 6 to 10 hurricanes, and we had 7 last year, so again, in about the same range. And 3 to 6 major hurricanes, and there were 4 last year. So it's looking about the same as it was last year. Now, we were fortunate enough last year, we had a couple of storms that kind of threatened us, looked like they were coming this way, and then kind of veered off, so we were fortunate enough. But one of the things that is probably the most important about hurricane season is always be prepared and be overly prepared. So as a community, regardless of what we think is going to hit us, is not going to hit us, we're always going into this fully prepared and ready for a storm, regardless of what happens. And so as residents, I want you all to also take that seriously and know that we prepare for this every year. Many of you I know have lived in Florida for a long time and have been through many hurricane seasons and many storms. Some of you have gone through Hurricane Charlie, which lived through probably some of the worst that people have seen in a storm setting. So I know many of you are already ready for this and kind of know what to expect. But today we are going to go through our hurricane information booklet. We're going to talk about some of the things that are important for you as residents, and then what we're going to respond with here at Southport Square and how we're going to keep you safe through hurricane season. And then at the end, we'll open it up for questions. If you have any questions, maybe during the presentation, if you want to jot them down so you don't forget. And then at the end, we'll open up for questions and hopefully answer any questions that you might have. We are also televising this. We will be replaying this. So if there's something that you miss or you want to go back and take notes, because I know some of you are very astute and want to, good note takers. But if you'd like to go back and watch it again, you are more than welcome to, and we'll be playing it for some residents that weren't able to attend today. So the information will be out there. But before I get into the booklet, I just wanted to share, I came back from my vacation this morning, I got into the office, and I had a card on my desk. And I'm sure she won't mind if I say who the card was from, but Marilyn Hill left me a card on my desk, and it was quite humorous. I got back, and she had written me a little card that said she went to the grocery store because she saw Governor DeSantis had allowed for some tax-exempt purchases for hurricane supplies. And she went to Publix, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, Marilyn, if it's okay with you. But she was walking through the aisles, and she's like, well, my flashlight's good, I still got batteries, all is well, so I'm just going to grab a great bottle of champagne and some chocolates. And she got to the register, and she, was getting rung up, and the woman proceeded to tell her that it was not part of the tax-exempt status. And Marilyn said, well, actually, I survived Hurricane Charlie, and I will tell you, this is on my list of supplies this year. So, I guess I could have started with that joke. Anyway, thank you, Marilyn. I enjoyed reading your card this morning. It gave me a chuckle when I got back to my desk. So, as we kind of go through, just know that there are some tax-exempt savings out there for hurricane purchases. There was a question about water that came up today, and we'll address that, but we will be working through those water orders again. I'll be working with dining to get those rolled out, so if you would like to purchase some of water, gallon jugs, things like that, we'll be offering that and delivering them to apartments here in the very near future. So hopefully everybody has their hurricane packet, and I'll try to keep up with the pages that I'm going through as we walk through this. But I'd like to just go through and talk about some of the key areas and maybe highlight a couple of things that might help you as we progress. So, of course, in the beginning of the hurricane booklet, you always have the table of contents for quick reference. So if there's something that you want to thumb to relatively quickly, it's right there for you. But I'm going to start on page 1 where it talks about resident readiness. And I think that, as you talk about hurricane season, one of the biggest things that people always talk about is your hurricane supply list. That is also going to hold true for our residents here at Southport Square. Now, we are able to provide for some things here as we progress through, but we want to make sure that you have some of the essentials. Some food, water, battery-powered radio, flashlights, medications, things like that. I'm not going to read the whole list because I know y'all can go through it and look at it, but just some things to note. Please do not utilize candles. I know a lot of times they sell those emergency candles that burn forever. The challenge is that those also become fire hazards. So we ask that you please just utilize batteries and flashlights. You'll notice that nowadays, if you buy those LED flashlights, they will last for a very, very long time, and they are super bright. So if you're interested, those are some things you can find at Walmart or on Amazon. Publix even has some of those. Or if you shop at Harbor Freight Tools, they have some really great stuff at Harbor Freight, and it's really not expensive at all. So just to give you some ideas of places you can go to find those. They also have some really cool LED lanterns that just pop open, and they're really bright. You can just set them on a table, and they'll illuminate a room. So that's another great item to have in your toolkit if you'd like to look for that. But lighting, as we get into this a little bit further, we'll talk about what works in your apartment and what doesn't when we get to that point. Also, just about halfway down the page there, it talks about first and fifth floor. If you live on the first floor or the fifth floor, there is potential that we have to evacuate you to a different floor. So we would just ask that if you're on either of those floors, that you have a couple of extra items in a backpack or a little carry case or something, that if you have to evacuate out of your apartment, you have with you. And that the reason those first and fifth floor apartments might get evacuated is that if we do take on any type of storm surge, a significant storm surge amount, we might have to evacuate up from the first floor up. Okay, so we are about 10 feet above sea level, so we've got quite a bit of wiggle room, but if we're going to take on any more water, we'll evacuate up. And on the fifth floor, if we're threatened with potentially higher winds, once we get over that fourth floor, that fifth floor gets that higher amount of wind speed. And so it's a little bit more unsafe on that fifth floor based on the elevation. So we do evacuate down out of that fifth floor. So those are just some of the reasons why we evacuate those two floors. And you can see some of the items that we ask that you just bring. Blanket, pillow in case you have to stay for a bit of time, maybe a towel, something like that. We will obviously try to make for as best accommodations as we possibly can, but in a storm, know that we're just there to be safe and to make sure that people are as comfortable as they possibly can in a safe setting. Resident action items at the bottom, just some things to think about when storms are threatening us. You kind of want to keep some cash on hand because remember, if we lose power, sometimes those ATM machines don't work. So even if you do leave and are traveling somewhere or right here in our own bank, those ATM machines might not work. And if ATM machines don't work, sometimes those credit card scanners don't work either. So cash is always helpful to have on hand in case of a storm coming up. Also for car owners, think about things like your radiator hose, your batteries, your tires, and making sure that you have gas in your car. If y'all remember, for those that were here during Irma or any other larger storms, when Irma hit, gas was a real challenge and people were just kind of like running out of gas on the interstates because they couldn't evacuate, they couldn't find fuel. That became a challenge. So having your car, filled up and ready to go ahead of time is always very helpful. Also, if you have furniture on your lanai, so your outdoor space, please just know that we ask that you bring that furniture in. The main reason for that is if we get heavy winds, that furniture can become a projectile and fly into other windows and places. And so that we ask that that furniture is brought into the apartment or into a safe place and secured. We also ask that the lanai windows are open before the storm hits. And I will tell you, I've kind of gone back and forth with this over the years. An old maintenance director that was here previously that lived through multiple storms essentially just said those apartments that have the lanais open do a lot better. The wind passes through the screen and doesn't have the pressure on the vinyls. It doesn't blow the vinyls out as often. So it does protect and preserve those vinyls, and the wind is able to pass through those apartments a little bit easier. Okay?
Brian?
Yes?
How wide do you recommend opening?
As far as you can open them. So if you can open them all the way up, open them all the way up. I know sometimes there's some apartments where maybe they stick a little bit or something, but as far open as you can get them, the more airflow that's able to go through there, the better. And I will tell you that there will be rain in there probably, because obviously during a storm it comes in sideways. And so, you know, if there's any damage sustained from rain, intrusion, things like that, we will obviously fix after the storm, but it is safest to keep those lanai screens open. So.
Is that top and bottom?
Top and bottom, yep. All of your lanai vinyls, as much as you can get open. Yep, absolutely. All right, we're going to move over to page 2, section 2. So we talked a little bit about relocation of first and fifth floor residents. Now, I will say that each storm is a little different in how we prepare for it. So it depends on, you know, are we threatened with storm surge? Are we threatened with high winds? Are we threatened with flooding? Are we threatened with a storm coming from the south or the north or the east or the west? And how is it going to impact our community? So every time a storm is coming to us, I am meeting with my team. I am staying in touch with our Charlotte County Emergency Management Operations. And we're coming up with our plan as to how we're going to approach the storm. Now, we kind of know exactly what our process is going to be, but sometimes that can change a little bit. So what we have in here, we have written our processes of how we will evacuate people and what our game plan is, but sometimes that gets tweaked. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those changes as we go through this plan here, based on what we expect during the storm that is threatening us. So the first one, talking about our residents, you know, our first and fifth floor residents. Our first floor residents would move up to the third floor, okay, and our fifth floor residents would move down to the fourth floor. Now, we're not going to, every storm, move first and fifth floor residents, okay? That would only be if we're threatened with storm surge, significant storm surge, or extremely high winds, okay? Those would be the only times we would move those apartments. So even though we have it written here, that doesn't mean every storm we're evacuating those corridors, okay? We do have noted at the bottom of section 2, kind of in the middle of the page there, it talks about for safety purposes, all residents will be instructed to move into the hallway corridors during the brunt of the storm. Well, that is very situational. And by that, what we mean is that we want to get people away from windows, because obviously if a window breaks and you have glass or debris coming into an apartment, that could be a challenge, okay? But what that means for us is that situationally, we have to look at the storm. And so if we know that the storm and the wind is going to come from, let's say, the east coming this way, we might evacuate people on the east side of the building into the corridors, but leave the west, you know, side of the building in their apartments, okay? So there are some things that we want to be smart about how we're keeping residents safe, but also keeping residents out of harm's way and in as convenient manner as possible. So section 3 just talks about, you know, some of the options you have and some of the things to consider you want to start thinking about now. You know, are you going to stay with us during the storm, or are you going to evacuate? Some of you I know have family that might be in the north part of the state or in other locations. Make that plan now. You know, figure out what it is that would make you leave and when you would leave. You want to make sure that if you are going to leave and evacuate and not stay here at Southport Square during us, that you get out early enough, right? Because we saw that in Irma. A lot of people waited till the end and then they couldn't get out of the state. So it's important to make sure that you have that plan and you execute that plan early enough in the storm, you know, reporting process. With that, we also, and I would ask, I highlighted mine here, but about halfway down the page in section 3, there's a LCS hotline number. I would encourage you to maybe highlight that or make sure that your family or friends or anybody that's going to be checking on you or if you are planning on evacuating, make sure you note that number. That number is where we will call in our updates to LCS, and they will broadcast that on our hotline. So what that means is that if you did evacuate and we have sustained any damage here, or there's roadways that are closed, we're going to make sure that you know not to come back until we're ready for you to come back, because we don't want you to come back to something that you can't, get settled back into. So it's a great number to have. It's also a great number to be able to share with family and friends, because they can call and get updates of exactly what's going on with the community. So we'll periodically post updates to that hotline account, and then that way people can call in and just know what's happening at the community, how we're doing, if we've sustained any damage, if we're here, if we've evacuated. Okay, so a great number for people to have and one to have programmed in your phone. Also, just a note, if you do plan to evacuate ahead of a storm, please do not evacuate into a manufactured or mobile home. This building is a very safe building. This building is hardened enough to withstand up to a Category 4. And we can take on up to 10 feet of storm surge is what, we're kind of the capacity set to. And so going to a manufactured or a mobile home, I mean, for many of you that have lived in the state of Florida, you see what happens in some of those homes, and it's just not a safe place to be. So we strongly encourage you that if you are going to evacuate, please get to a safe place, one that would be out of the way of any storm surge and hopefully would be protected from winds. All right, flipping over to page 3. So talk a little bit further about the different options that you have. So plan 1, you can relocate out of the county or out of the state. I would suggest that if you are going to leave or evacuate, go far enough away to get out of harm's way. Don't go up the street, because you'll be in the same position that we're in here, right? So just a thought of where you evacuate. So just be smart about where you are considering to go. Again, I know many of you might have family that live in other parts of the state or maybe in other states, and that's great. Get up north, go up, enjoy the cooler weather maybe for a little bit while the storm passes. But that's wonderful. I would just ask that you think about where you're going to evacuate to before it happens. Please make sure that if you are going to evacuate, you let us know. We do have a resident evacuation form that we would just like to know, where you're going to be, so when all is said and done, we can at least keep track of you, where you're at, and we can reach back out to you if we don't hear from you. It's important for us. We want to always know where our residents are, whether you're going to stay here with us or whether you're going to evacuate prior to a storm. And then it just talks about if you're going to leave, leaving in plenty of time. They recommend at least 72 hours prior to the projected arrival of the storm. I would say, if you see a storm coming and you're planning on evacuating, the sooner you can get out, the better. So as early as you can make that decision, head out. Also, please just fill out that evacuation form and notify the front desk when you do leave, so that we know you've left the property and we can, not worry about accounting for that person as well. And then on the bottom, we just have a checklist. So if you are going to evacuate and leave, just go through that checklist. We try to set this up as helpful as possible for you to think about some of the things you might want before you leave. But please just go through that. You might have personal circumstances that you want some other items with you as well. But this is a good starter list to just review and make sure that you have the items with you that you're going through. One other note, I will just say that the interstates get very busy if you're evacuating, so there are some alternate routes. I don't know if many of you know US 27 kind of runs up through the middle of the state. You can access it out through Kings Highway. That is a little bit less traveled street or roadway, so during a storm, that might be a better route to take than trying to go up I-75. So just a thought, we did note it in here in case you are planning to evacuate, read through that. It might help you with some easy ways to get out of the county. All right, continuing on, page 4, talks a little bit more about relocating out of the state or county. So after the hurricane has passed, if you did evacuate, please just call that LCS hotline number, again noted there, that 888-214-8464. Please just call that number before you return. That will kind of give you the idea of when we've gotten back to normal operations, and that we've kind of given the all clear that we're ready to have people come back on campus. We are in evacuation zone orange within Charlotte County. So as they go through and they talk, a lot of times you'll see the updates on the weather channels, and they'll talk about, what know your zone or what evacuation zone you're in. So we are in orange, and that will tell us, if we're going to evacuate or not. Now, we will always be in contact with Charlotte County Emergency Management. Every year we have that open communication with them, and we'll take their lead as far as whether they feel it's important that we evacuate or not. We are a little different than most of the other senior living communities in Charlotte County, so oftentimes they'll evacuate some of those first floor smaller buildings and remove people out of there because they're not as storm worthy, if you will. And so we might still stay in our buildings here. I keep hitting the stand here, I'm sorry. But we might still stay even though they might evacuate a couple of the other smaller locations. So in the past, for those of you that might have been here during Irma, we actually took on some of our sister communities that were in smaller buildings into our community here because we were the safer buildings to be in. Now, we no longer have those relationships with those properties here in Charlotte County. Those were when we were under the Brookdale ownership. And so with our kind of removal from Brookdale, those Brookdale communities are off on their own now. They work within their network to go to different locations. We still have our network of LCS communities, so if we are going to evacuate here, we might go to another LCS property, which we have several up in the Tampa area. We've got them in Bradenton. We've got them all the way up as far as Jacksonville and to other states. So we have a lot of opportunities to evacuate to another community. If we are looking at taking on a significant hit or a very large storm, we would work through our evacuation process through that. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about evacuation here in just a moment. So the second option then for you is if you don't want to evacuate prior to a storm, is to stay here with us. And a safe option, we work very hard to make sure that all of our residents are safe during a storm. That is our first and foremost mission, is to make sure our residents stay safe. So you can talk here a little bit about Southport Square. We are a well-constructed facility, 10 feet above sea level, so we definitely have a little bit of elevation. We're far enough away from the coast that even with a 10-foot sea level rise, we probably wouldn't see 10 feet of sea level here this far inland. It could happen, and so that's why we stay in touch with our Charlotte County Emergency Management, who's always in touch with the meteorologists and the National Hurricane Center. If you do stay, just remember that some of the services that you rely upon on a day-to-day basis might not be there. So things like internet, utilities, phones, stuff like that, those might go down in the middle of the storm. So some of those things that you normally would have might not be there. Cell phones, for the most part, operate. There are times when it gets a little spotty. So just so you know, if you don't have a cell phone and you want to get a cell phone, it's a little bit more reliable than a landline during a storm, okay? It is not a 100% gonna work the whole time, though. If you do stay, be prepared to be evacuated into the corridors or evacuated up or down, depending on the floor that you live on. So we will announce what our game plan is when we kind of get into that. Just a quick show of hands, how many have been here during like a storm or even like a pre-storm where we've kind of gotten set up and you've heard my communications? So a couple, yeah. So I really try to work hard on communication. I think that's probably the most important component, is making sure that you as residents know what's going on. Even with this potential tropical depression one that came through, I made a call. I was on vacation down in the Keys, trying to get out of the Keys before the depression came through. But I wanted to make sure I got a call to you all because it was important for you all to know that we were prepared and ready. Even though we didn't expect a whole lot, we were ready to go and prepared for the storm. So as we get closer, I want to make sure that we are communicative with you and let you know kind of what our game plan is for the storm, what we plan on doing if the storm comes. I'm going to just jump down to section 4, the pet information. So for those of you pet lovers, dogs, cats, birds, whatever you might have, there is some additional steps to take. So if we are planning on evacuating out of the apartments, we do ask that you have your pet ready to go in a crate or a carrier, something like that. We will have designated locations for those pets to go in. And the reason we do that is we don't want pets to remain in your apartment for fear of if a window breaks or if something happens, we don't have a way to get them to safety. And so we do ask that those pets come with us. We will put them in one location. It usually is 1 or 2 designated apartments. And we have staff members that will continuously check on them, take them out if they need to go out. If they're cats, they'll hopefully be able to work there and clean the litter and things like that. So we will have people assigned to making sure that those pets are staying safe during the storm, but they won't be able to evacuate into the corridors with you or up or downstairs if we do a vertical evacuation. So that's one of the reasons why we ask that you just take note to sort of the pet information, some of the items that you might want to have prepared and ready to go if a storm is coming. If you want to evacuate, so kind of moving on to page 5, if you're going to take your pet with you, or if you're going to board your pet at another location, we tried to provide you a list of items that you might want to have prior to the storm also. Okay, so some things like a picture of your pet, a portable carrier, a week's supply of food and water, stuff like that. Those are some things that will probably be helpful for you to get your pet into a boarding place, a shelter, or to take with you. We also have a website. Dawn has done a little research on this, and there's a website here about halfway down the page. It's bolded. It is www.petswelcome.com. And if you look at that website, it will give you a list of pet-friendly shelters that are kind of throughout the state. And so you can see if you do want to board your pet, where you can take them, or kennels you can take the pet to. So hopefully giving you as much information as you can to make some important decisions here as storms are approaching. So section 5 does talk about mandatory evacuation. So if Charlotte County comes to us and says, you have to evacuate, we obviously are going to follow their lead on that. And so if we do evacuate, we take care of all of that for the residents that are staying with us, okay? So if we do give or are given the orders by the county that we have to evacuate the buildings, we have an agreement with a bus finder company that will actually provide all of the buses for us. We have different locations that we will go to depending on where the storm is coming from or where its anticipated path is. So we have places, we have looked at, researched hotels in different places, as well as senior living communities that are as part of our network within Life Care Services. And so we will have a plan and a place to take all of our residents, including our health center residents as well. If we have to evacuate, are we going to take our pets? No, they stay behind. We just let them, swim it out. No, I'm kidding. Yes, we will make plans for taking the pets with as well. So a great opportunity to think about, if we did have to evacuate, what you would want to take with you also. But no, we would make sure that, people first and foremost, pets second, and second most. Parrots last, is that what you said? All right, parrots, anybody that has a parrot, they're the last ones to go, I guess. No, but we do take our pets with us when we evacuate as well. We'll make sure that they're safe. Section 6, so we're at the bottom of page 5 right now. So section 6 just talks about our food service plan. So it is important in your hurricane supply list to make sure that you have food in your apartment. Please make sure that the food that you have are things that you can prepare without any power or any stove or any microwave, okay? Those are things that are not going to work in your apartment. And please don't rely on your electric can opener to open those cans. So please make sure that if you don't have a manual can opener, that you buy a manual can opener. And that any types of items that you have, it's always great to get those non-perishable items, crackers, chips, anything that'll store for a period of time, soups, canned goods, stuff like that. There's even, in these days with all the preservatives that they have out there, I know they're not the greatest for you, but you can get some stuff that will last a long time on a shelf that you would never think could be in your pantry, but it can be these days. So it's great to just think about some of those items that you can store in your hurricane kit and keep that food. So what will happen is during a storm, in the heart of the storm, we will probably not be able to provide for meal service. Obviously, our goal will be to keeping our residents safe. So we will take all of our staff that is here locked down on our campus with us, and they will all become safety monitors, right? So all of our servers, all of our cooks, anybody like that will be here to look out for the safety of our residents and our staff. Once we get through the storm, we do have emergency food supply here, emergency water supply here as well, and we will start to prepare meals. Now, we always try to keep about a week's worth of food and water on site here. It's a little different in our healthcare center. It's a regulated building, and so we have a very specific amount of water and food. In our independent living, we estimate based on what our meal needs are. So our total meals, our total water, things like that, we have set up. We want to make sure that you have enough stuff in your apartment to last you about 3 days. That's really kind of the overall, is at least 3 days to get through in case we have to hunker down for a period of time. We also do have contracts set up with our food purveyor. So Cisco is the company that we purchase from. We have emergency hurricane contacts set up, so as soon as roadways are open, we're the first to get food, from those types of locations. Water, the first ones to come in. We also have set up for fuel for our generators, so we can run for, I believe it's 96 hours on our generators in the independent living. And if those run short, we have fuel contracts in place with our fuel provider that can bring additional fuel in, and we can refuel as soon as the roadways are open. So our goal is that we can make through for as long as we might need with roadways not being cleared, things like that, but then we'll be able to replenish and restock as quickly as possible after the storm is passed and it's safe to do so. All right. All right, I already covered section 6, number 3 there, so I'm going to just move into section 7 on page 6, about halfway down page 6. So section 7 talks about staffing. I think just overall in this, I just want to note, please just be patient and understanding as we go through a storm. We are not going to have a full staff on site here. When we go to a storm, we have different hurricane teams that come into our building. So during the storm, before the storm, during the storm, and after the storm. Those are our 3 teams. And so as we go through those teams, we again are working on the safety of our residents and our staff. And so we want to make sure that we have people here to ensure the safety of you all as residents. It is not going to be an overabundance of staff, so if there's a question or something that's going on, unless it's a critical question or something that's needed right away, you might not get an answer right away. So we just ask that you be patient and understanding with our teams as we're trying to take care of a lot of stuff and keep you all safe here. We're going to do our best as possible to make sure that you're comfortable and that you're safe during the time that we're hunkered down here. The bottom of page 6, this is a very important note. Section 8 talks about Southport Square as a refuge. Please note that we do not take on any additional people during those storms. Other than our staff, our teams that are going to be here, we will bring them in and put them into apartments, but please do not invite family members, friends, anybody like that onto our property for a storm because we don't have the capacity to take on additional people. We have had, during Irma, I will tell you, we learned very quickly that we have to secure the perimeter of our campus because everybody and their brother wanted to come here during Irma after the storm was approaching us very quickly. So we have now learned, every storm you go through, you learn something new. We've now learned that the perimeter of our campus has to become a completely secure campus during a storm, especially when a large one is coming, because a lot of people just don't have a place to go, or if they didn't prepare ahead of time, they are panicking toward the end. And so we want to make sure that we are keeping you all safe and that we don't have additional people here that we're also trying to shelter and provide for supplies for as well. So please just don't ask for family members, friends, anybody else to come on our campus during that time. I did get a question from resident Ken. I think I saw Ken in the back. One of the questions was like our contractors that work in the apartments, the construction crew, and other vendors that we have here. All of those people are dispersed. They are not here on site during a storm, so everything kind of halts. They go away, they do their thing. We do not have construction going on during those storms. We hunker down here. When we get to the point of our lockdown, it is our staff and our residents that are here during that storm. Okay? Great question, though. Thank you. All right, so top of page 7, section 9, our emergency generator. So this just kind of runs through a little bit of what runs on our emergency generator. Now let me clarify this because in the more recent years, our generator in our health center has changed. So our health center, Harbor Health Center, is a fully generated building. Okay, what that means is that if we lose power there, our generator, it transfers over to our generator, and you don't even know that there's been a change. Everything works, the lights all function, everything in that building functions off of our generator. So we have a very large generator in that building, and obviously our residents in the health center need the care and the support that would be provided through that generator. In our independent living buildings, it's a little different. So we do have generators in those buildings, but it does not work everything in the building. So what it will work is there will be some limited lighting in the hallways. I want to say it's like every other light or every third light, and I can't remember exactly what it is. I think it's every other light in the corridor that will stay on. Stairs in the dining room, okay? So it will be limited lighting, just enough to provide some support. Now we also have a lot of these little LED lanterns that will go and set up around the building to provide for some additional lighting. So if we do go to generator backup or generator system, we'll be placing those lanterns around. Just know those lanterns are from us and they're set out to provide for some lighting, so please don't pick them up and walk down the corridor with them. Elevators will still function, but I will tell you that Gables West, we had a challenge with the elevators during Hurricane Irma. So the elevators technically are on our generator backup, but that's not to say that a lightning strike cannot take out the elevator system as a whole. So that's what happened during Irma in Gables West. We did not have functioning elevators during Hurricane Irma. So it was all stair use, and we had staff and support to help with folks that could not get up and down the stairs. Kitchen equipment. So we have some limited use of kitchen equipment. Some of our kitchen equipment is electric and some is gas. So the items that are gas powered we can still utilize, and so we have some of those set up specifically designated so that we can still provide for some heating, but it is not everything in our kitchens. Our fire alarm panel boards for life safety purposes and our assurance system still function on the generator. Another great question Ken brought up was with our new assurance system, because we just changed our assurance system over. It is a wireless system. All of that system is tied into our generators. So it still is set up on our generator and will still function during a storm as long as our generator flips over and kicks on, okay? So another great question, thank you, Ken. We have some business phones that will still work. It's very limited, a couple of phones, front desk, a couple of designated offices, things like that. Those phones will still function. And then we do have a couple of electrical outlets on our 4th floor in the game rooms. So as we get through this, it is very important to make a note on your designated health forms that if you have anything like oxygen concentrators or any type of medical equipment that you need that has to be plugged in, we want to know about it. Tanya, get with Tanya, Jerry Faith, Debbie Link, let them know what it is. We'll make sure we get the form filled out. We just want to know how many people we need to have in that 4th floor game room that are going to need to be plugged into those outlets that are critical for health purposes, okay? So please, if you have any type of medical equipment that is run off of electric that you need to have, please just touch base with them so we make sure you're on our list. And then the big box in the middle, you know, we always put that, you know, right there front and center so you can see page 7. There will be no air conditioning in the buildings. So we do not have our air conditioning units tied into the generator, okay? Now, we have a couple of ways to cool the building in different areas. So we have been pretty creative, and for those of you that live in Gables East in the most recent future have lived through some days with those portable AC units. But we do have some portable AC units, and we do have some capacity to run those off of smaller generators. And so as we kind of get a little bit further along in planning for hurricane season, if for whatever reason we lost power and were knocked out, you know, please don't anticipate having air conditioning, but we will try to work on setting up what we would consider cool zones. So if you were hot in your apartment or hot in the building, you would be able to get into one of those cool zones and sit for a little while and cool off. We want to make sure that our residents are as comfortable as you can possibly be, but know that we're also, you know, just have gone through a storm and we're probably not going to be as comfortable as we normally are. All right, section 10, you are welcome to read through this. This kind of just gives us an idea of our building specifications. Just a couple of items to note. We have 96 hours of generator power in our buildings. And I think probably just some things to know, brick and concrete block with pre-stressed slabs for ceilings and floors. So your apartments are very secure and they're sturdy apartments. We still evacuate out of those apartments just because of the windows, being close to windows. That's the reason why we would evacuate out if we're going to anticipate high winds coming into certain apartment side of the building. But otherwise, it is a very sturdy apartment, sturdy building. So you can feel confident in the building specifications here at Southport Square. All right, next page, page 8. We're almost through the end of this. I know there's a couple more areas here, a little bit more informational, but these are the items more specific to Southport Square. So the top of page 8 talks about, section 11 talks about command centers. So we do set up our front desks as command centers. Those kind of become the hub for each of the buildings, and that's where we will have our teams kind of working out of. We do try to make sure that we have people available on each floor to make sure folks have questions answered. So as we go through, we do set up designated staff members that will be responsible for each area. So you should, in your floor, have somebody that will be there to answer questions and make sure you know kind of what's going on and what the next steps are, okay, in addition to the communication that we'll be sending out. Section 12 just talks about a little bit of an overview of hurricane season, and you'll note the gray bar in the middle says hurricane season June 1st through November 30th. Well, just remember, this year that was still the case. Next year it might change. It might be May 15th, maybe the year following, I don't know. But just, you know, be prepared. That might move a little bit earlier in years to come as we progress. But you can kind of see in here, there's a couple of items of information that can be noted for National Hurricane Center and what types of categories of storm. Category 1 being the lowest hurricane setting, Category 5 being the highest level of hurricane status. Also at the very bottom of the page, please just note Southport Square is not a public shelter. So we do not take people in from the outside just to shelter here. We are set up to be shelter for our residents and our staff, but we are not a public shelter for people to come from the outside community here to Southport Square. All right, I'm going to jump into section 13, page 9, and just wanted to kind of talk through a little bit of the storm categories. So for many of you that have lived in Florida, you've probably seen and heard this terminology a lot. Every year I always go back and kind of, you know, freshen up on it a little bit, because it's interesting when you talk about a tropical storm watch versus a tropical storm warning, or a hurricane watch and a hurricane warning. So it's always interesting when you look at this, you know, I guess the easiest way to say is a watch is that it's a little bit further out before it's going to get to you. The warning is a little bit closer, and you better be prepared. So whenever we come under a watch, we're usually already in the loop of taking precautions on our campus and getting prepared and ready to go and designating our plan with our team for each storm that comes up. You can also see the categories of wind, and note the category 3, 4s, and 5s are what they consider a major hurricane. So 1s and 2s, still not anything to, you know, not be afraid of, because there can still be some significant damage with 1s and 2s. But 3, 4, and 5 is really where you get the most impact of a storm that might be coming. And I will also say that these wind speeds over the last few years, there's been a lot of talk in the meteorological world that the wind speed is kind of a portion of how they rank a storm, a hurricane. And so they take into account a couple of things like wind speed, as well as things like storm surge. So those are some of the things that they might designate differently for a category 3, 4, or 5 versus a 1 or 2, based on if it's a significant storm surge, they can bump that up a little bit. All right. So the last few pages here, and I'm just going to note them, but I would probably just read through these pages. I think it's important to just have as much information as you possibly can. Page 10 has just some helpful information. Alert Charlotte. How many of y'all have heard of Alert Charlotte or are using that already? Yeah, so some of you have that in place. That is a great system to use. Whether you have a smartphone or whether you just have a normal phone line at your home, you can sign up with Alert Charlotte and give them either your phone number, and you can get either a phone call or text messages from Alert Charlotte. And what they do is they'll send out, anytime there's any type of weather event or anything that might impact you. And when you sign up, you get to designate what you want to be notified for. So I designated everything in the beginning and realized very quickly that was a mistake because I was woken up at 2 in the morning because there was a thunderstorm coming through Charlotte County. But you might want to get some of the more significant news or alerts. Now, if I lived on a boat, that might be helpful for me to know, right? So, but you can sign up for things like tornado watch, tornado warning, hurricane watch, hurricane warnings, anything like that, significant weather. And it's a great thing to have because it does notify you anytime something pops up. You'll just know ahead of time that, be prepared for something, especially for like tornadic activity, because we have been known to get tornadoes into Charlotte County, and that's something that can pop up at any time, even in the middle of the winter. Those things can just creep up. A couple of other websites there at the bottom. AccuWeather is a great one, FEMA.gov, the University of Florida's website. One that I like a lot is the National Hurricane Center website, which is the second one from the bottom there. It's nhc.noaa.gov. That is an excellent website. If you haven't checked that one out, go to that website. I have it on my phone, so I can just pull it up on my phone. And every time there's an update, you can click on the update, and it will give you the cone, the path, the wind probability, the whole 9 yards. It's a great website. You hear right from the National Hurricane Center what they're passing along to all the meteorologists that are sitting in like the Weather Channel and places like that. And then the NWS NOAA, I think that's the National Weather Service website, is the last one noted down there as well. And then on the next page, page 11, we've got a lot of different local TV stations, radio stations that keep updated. So if you do have a battery-operated radio, that's a great way to go, to have a battery-operated radio. Some folks have those, the crank ones. You ever seen those? You crank it and it operates. That's pretty cool too. Your arm gets a little tired after time, but you can hear a little bit here and there. But those, you can tune into a couple of those radio stations. Great to have those, that listing available. And then we also provide for some emergency shelters that are available here in Charlotte County. Now, these are just provided for somebody that might want to know. Oftentimes, I know many of you might have family or friends that still live out in the community, and they might be looking for a shelter. But I would hope that if you were looking for a place that you would either choose to stay here at Southport Square or evacuate outside of Charlotte County. Okay, so please just think about that. We are a safe shelter place here at Southport Square. Just a note, not all shelters may be open, so usually when a storm is approaching, the radio stations and the news channels will be playing which shelters are opening and when they open, what they'll accept. So there's been modifications, some of them with COVID, whether they take folks and whether you have to wear a mask, not wear a mask, whatever it might be. Also note that some of those accept pets and some don't. So if you have a pet or if your loved one that you're hopefully sharing that information with knows to check whether they accept pets or not if they are trying to evacuate with a pet. All right, the last few pages here, we're in the home stretch. Page 12, important contact information, a list of numbers that you might want to keep handy. So if you want to post this maybe on your refrigerator or something just to have available. And then page 13, that is our current listing of our directors and staff that might be important for you to reach out to during a storm. Please just remember that when we're prepping for a storm, we're kind of all out and about doing our thing. So if you want to reach somebody, probably the best place to go is the front desk and getting a message through our front desk. And we will try to get that answer or communication back to you as quickly as possible. Calling extensions during a storm or even coming up to a storm, we might not get to that voice message right away as we're out and about on our campus. So this is just a listing of everybody that's here. Another excellent question Ken Buck asked about Randy Barnett. He's listed here as our maintenance director, plant operations, and we all know he'll be retiring here in the very near future. So when we have the new update of the next directors for those positions, we'll make sure that you all as residents get their names. The extension will stay the same. It will just be a new person sitting in that chair. And again, going to that front desk is always a great option because they've always got the most up-to-date directory. So very good point, though, Ken. Thank you very much. And then the last thing I think, as we mentioned earlier, just please take all warnings seriously. I think the time that we're gonna fail is when we sit back and think it's not going to impact us, right? I think many people that lived through Hurricane Charlie or know the story of Hurricane Charlie was a good example of what happens when we kind of think a storm might be heading somewhere else and then it turns at the last minute. So as much as we like to rely upon the information that we get from the National Weather Service, it is not always 100% accurate. They cannot predict exactly what's going to happen to a storm. And if you ever look at the path of a storm after it's gone through, it's always like this, right? It's never, the straight line that they always say it's going to go in this cone somewhere, right? They always talk about the cone of uncertainty. But if you look at that, it kind of goes all over the place. So there's really a lot of factors that impact that, and we don't know what's going to happen with those storms. So when we are threatened with a storm, we take it very seriously. We hope you take that seriously as well. And you stick to your plan, and we will stick to our plan, and we'll make sure that everybody pulls through that storm safely in the end. So the last piece here, we've provided you this cool little map. You can get these online also, but for anybody that just wants to have some fun and plot the path of the storm, you're welcome to do this, or just kind of see where it's lingering. One of the great things about that National Hurricane Center website is they kind of give you this map with the cone and the wind probabilities and all of that. You can click through each of the little images to see kind of what's going to happen with that storm. So it's a great little thing to have, but if you want to track it manually, you're welcome to do so. And then on the back of that is the resident evacuation form. So if you are going to evacuate, we please just ask that you fill this out. I will also tell you, I get this question a lot is, well, what if I don't know if I want to evacuate this storm or not? That's okay. You don't have to make that decision right now. We ask that you try to have that plan in place because it's a lot easier than having to make that decision every time a storm comes. But if you want to evacuate, maybe a storm comes and it's a big storm and you didn't choose to evacuate previously, but this time you want to evacuate, you are more than welcome to do so. Please just make sure you notify our front desk and fill out the form, okay? Or if you've previously said you were going to evacuate and then you decided, no, it's not a good idea, I'm going to stay here, that's fine as well. Just please let us know at the front desk so we know to account for you while we're here. So, with that being said, we're at the end of the hurricane booklet. I'm just going to open it up for any questions or comments that you might have. And let me see, Ken, did I answer? I'm sorry, let me just see, because there was another. I think I got all of them. I think I got all your questions. Okay, all right. So, Marilyn, question here.
I wish you would explain a little bit of why there is a mandatory evacuation. And when it was told to people, people said, well, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm going to go to the church before they leave me out. But there has to be a mandatory. We don't make that decision.
Yes, so that's a good point. Marilyn is talking about a mandatory evacuation. So a couple of things with that. One is if the county tells us to evacuate, we have to evacuate every single person out of our buildings, okay? You cannot stay if we are given that mandate from the county to evacuate the buildings, okay? So that is one thing that once we are given that, mandate, we have to evacuate. It is not safe to stay in a church or another area in Charlotte County. Once they have kind of given that mandate, that means that this area needs to be evacuated. They're concerned for storm, wind, storm surge, whatever it might be. So please just note that. I also will say that if we do have to evacuate into corridors or if we ask to evacuate up or down based on where you live, please follow that direction. We cannot have people in an unsafe situation. So if you feel that you're not going to want to evacuate into the corridor during a storm, I would please advise that you evacuate outside of the building before the storm gets here. Okay, because once we give that notice that we have to evacuate in the corridors, we are going to require everybody to come into those corridors if that's the case.
What I want people to know is that if it's really a bad storm, the hospitals cannot take us. The roads are impassable, and that's why we have to all get out.
Yeah. So just for the folks watching online, so the comment was that if it's a very bad storm, the hospitals are not going to be able to take people in, The roads will probably be closed. There's a lot to be considered in that. So please just make sure that you kind of come up with that game plan and stick to it. If it is to evacuate, get out plenty of time early. If it's to stay with us, be ready to just follow our instruction, and we're going to keep everybody safe. Yes, right here, Bob.
Are there any designated areas where we can charge our smartphones?
That's a great question. Designated area to charge a smartphone. So this is becoming more and more common of a problem. So you're welcome to use any of the outlets in the building to charge your smartphone, except when we go to generator power. If we go to generator power, it will only be those health outlets that we have in the 4th floor that will be designated for health equipment. Otherwise, I would encourage you a couple of items. There are battery packs that you can buy. There are chargeable, rechargeable phone rechargers that you can charge up prior to a storm. And they will be able to recharge your phone depending on the size battery pack you get. They can charge your phone so many times, okay? So a lot of people will use those battery backups. I have a couple in my office for my cell phone, particularly during a storm, and I keep those charged. So if for whatever reason, during a storm, we lose power, my phone starts to lose battery, I can plug into that power charger and recharge it back up to full battery. So that's probably the best option, is to look at some of those battery backup chargers. If you need some help finding one of those, reach out to me or Steve White could probably share with you a couple of those options. You can buy them at Walmart, you can buy them at on Amazon. I think Publix even has a couple of those rechargeables. And then I will also say, if you have a car, you can buy the car plug-in ones also. So you could go down and charge your phone in your car if you could get to your car after the storm passes and would want to run your car and let it charge. Yes, Walt.
I have a battery-powered weather radio. Is that considered adequate, or should I have something that can reach local stations?
No, you're fine. So the question is, Walt has a battery-powered weather radio, and that's completely fine. So it's really what you want to hear. So if you want to get a radio that actually dials into like some of the local stations, you can go buy a different battery-operated radio that will be able to tune to those. But if you have like the National Weather Service radio, that works just as well. They'll be putting out their publications and their briefings through that radio also. It's a great question. What other questions do we have? All right. Oh, yes. Joe?
I have a bathroom question.
Okay.
You said we need some water in our apartment to flush. Will we have assistance if we run out of water? Question one. Question two, what about those people in the hallway? What do they do for bathrooms?
Yeah, great question. So bathroom question. Nobody wanted to ask it. Joe came to the rescue. So the bathroom question. If we're evacuated into the corridors, where are we going to go to the bathroom? Well, in Hurricane Irma, for those of you in Gables East that got stuck with me, we were in the corridor for quite some time without restrooms. Peggy knows, right? So that was a little bit of we need to work on that one. But we do have it figured out. There are some common area bathrooms on each of the floors that would be accessible for the residents if we are in the corridors. We would please ask that you not go back into your apartments. We don't know, what might have happened with the storm, if there's still wind coming in the middle of the storm. So we're only going to evacuate during the height of the wind speed ultimately, okay? So that's the time we would be in those corridors. So we'll have public bathrooms readily available. The second question about if you have water in your apartment for flushing toilets and you run out of water, what happens? Well, we do go through and set up some trash cans, for lack of a better term, large trash cans that we will fill with water before a storm. So we will have for common area restrooms, and we can use them for some restrooms also. Limited supplies to how long that works, obviously, after the storm. But if we did lose water, sewer, we would be able to provide for some flushing. So please, for those of you that might, we don't have many, but some of you might still have like a bathtub in place. If you have that, you can always get a stopper and fill your bathtub up. That's a great way to do it. Some folks might have sinks that they want to fill or something like that. That's completely fine. Or you can even just use your normal tap water and fill additional jugs, not for drinking, but just specifically for flushing. Yes?
Do we
sewer?
Yes, so the question is, are we connected to the town sewer? So the Charlotte County.
I was in a community and we had water running in. It was going out, but the lift stations weren't working.
Sure, yep.
So I'm just thinking here,
Yep.
are the lift stations?
Sure, so we are on county water, and that can happen. So the question is, the lift stations might not work, which is essentially what kind of drags all the stuff out, right? So that can be an issue if it does back up and we have challenges with water coming in and no water going out. So if that does become a challenge for us or a problem, that's obviously a problem within the county, but we would be communicating out what our plan is. We do have some plans for what we can do in those instances. And I will tell you that if you've lived through Hurricane Charlie or any other major storm, a lot of times there are very big inconveniences during a storm. So I will tell you that plastic trash bags become very important during that time. Yes.
Brian, I'm concerned about the pets. We have a cat. Now, if we have to go out into the hall, can we take the cat with us in the hall?
So the question is, if they have a pet and we have to evacuate into the corridor, can you take the pet into the hallway with you? So we do not allow for pets to be in the corridor. So what we have set up ahead of time is we ask that you put your pet, dog, cat, whatever it might be, in a crate or a carrier, and we will have those designated locations, those apartments where we will put those pets, and we will have staff members that will watch over those pets. So again, for those of you here during Hurricane Irma, we had several apartments set up. We had a couple of dog walkers that were able to take the dogs in and out. Those that really loved, being with pets, and they were able to account for those. The reason we can't have the pets in the hallways is we have a hard time with excrement from the pets, and we also have people that are allergic to pets, and so we can't have the pets in the corridors for folks that are in those corridors as well. So.
Brian, that cat has not been out of our sight for all these years.
Yep.
She doesn't know anybody else. She will not.
So if you have a challenge with that, my suggestion would be is to look into boarding the cat or potentially evacuating with your pet. So those are really the only options that we have. We just can't allow for the pets to be in the corridors. So our plan is to evacuate those pets into apartments that we have designated, or to have them evacuate with you if you leave the community.
I have another question.
Yes.
On opening the windows in the lanai, if it rains very hard, where's that water gonna go?
So our lanais are designated with, if you look, you have a lip coming into your apartment. So just so you know, the question, just to repeat for those folks watching, where does the water go if it comes into the lanai, if we have the lanai vinyls open? So the water should run out. The lip coming into the apartment should be higher than what is designated where the drain ports are on your lanai. Now, obviously, if we take on a lot of rain, there can be some water intrusion into an apartment. That could happen. It is a hurricane. So if that does happen, we will make sure that we correct that issue. If it damages flooring, that's on us to fix it. But the goal is that that water will run off in most instances. Now, for people that live on the first floor, obviously there's potential for flooding and potential for storm surge, and that can become a challenge as well. But that's just part of living through a hurricane. We know that there are going to be some things where we have designated damages, water, things like that we might have to account for and fix after the storm. But again, the goal is that we want our residents to be safe and to protect our property as best we can. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I saw another question here, Bobby.
This might sound like a silly question,
No silly questions here today.
but I purchased water 2 years ago when you were selling the water,
Mhm.
okay? That I still have. Is that water still good?
So it's a great question. So she has some water that she purchased about 2 years ago. Is it still good? So most even water should have an expiration date on it. So look very closely.
I couldn't find it.
Okay, if you don't have an expiration date on it, you have to look at the type of container that it's in, okay? So, and I'll tell you why the type of container it's in. So if it's like a gallon jug, I think it's like a year or something like that on a gallon jug, okay? We have some larger water canisters that are like 5-gallon canisters. They last for, I want to say it's like 2 or 3 years, something like that. So it all varies based on the type of carrier that it's in or the bin that it's in. It also depends on whether it's been exposed to light, things like that. So my suggestion would be is if you have old water from last year's storm, use that as your flushing water and buy new drinking water. That might be the best way to go with it.
The drinking water too, I purchased.
Okay.
From you.
So I would use, and you can still use that drinking water as flushable water if it's older than a year or 2 old, just to be safe so you don't have any bacteria, things like that
But
might be
you're gonna
growing
be
this.
selling the
We
water
will,
again?
yep, we'll get that set up and we'll send that memo out to the residents
Thank
to
you.
know. Yep, great question. Yeah, in the back there.
Would we get help to move some of our furniture from the lanai inside? Because I couldn't bring it in.
Yeah, so that's a question we get a lot is if you have furniture on the lanai that you cannot move in, we will do our best to get somebody there to help you, but we cannot guarantee we'll get somebody there to help, okay? So please try to get what you can, and then you can definitely ask for somebody to come help, but it's gonna depend on how much prep we're doing for our property. So if we're being threatened by a big storm, you know, we might have people dispersed out taking care of some bigger issues. But definitely something you can ask the question for.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all very much, and it's looking like it's going to rain, so hopefully you can get home before it rains here. So have a great afternoon. Take care.